Hey everybody, it's Joel Williams and Chase Elleby at Williams Elleby. We hope you had a wonderful 2022 and we're coming back to you again strong in 2023 to start up more videos. We hope you enjoyed our 52 weeks of personal injury series where we kind of gave a general overview of the personal injury process. It's our hope this year to come out with some videos where we take a little bit deeper dive into some of the things that we painted with a broad brush last time. So what we want to do is start out this year talking about why where you file your case matters. So what are some reasons that there are rules obviously in place, Chase, where if you are going to file a lawsuit or if you have a potential claim, where you would have to file it.
Right.
But why does that matter?
Right. So that's referred to as venue, right? So when you hear people talk about, well, what's the venue? Where are we going to file suit? So venue is where you file suit, right? So in Georgia, that's because that's where we are. You got state court, you have superior court, you have magistrate court, you have federal court, but you also have 159 counties, right? So you have a ton of counties. So when you talk about venue, you talk about where you want to file your suit, and it matters for a lot of reasons. The first I can think of, sort of off the top of my head, are the judges, right? If you kind of have a familiarity with the judges who are going to be hearing your case, then you're probably going to be more likely to file suit there because they have a good reputation for being just good judges, fair judges, or whatever it might be. So judges is the first thing I think of.
Yeah, and sometimes you're restricted with that, right?
Correct.
So the most common example is if you're suing a single person, then you have to sue them in the county where they reside,
Correct.
At least in Georgia. So if they reside in one county, then that's where you have to file it. So the reason that that's important for people who may have a personal injury claim and the judge issue that Chase was talking about is if you're in that situation, say you live in Atlanta, but you need to file a case in, I don't know, Thomasville, well, if you hire an attorney out of Atlanta, they may not be as familiar with the judges in Thomasville. So it's at least worth considering whether you want to hire a firm that's outside of that county where you would file the case, or if you do that, maybe you would encourage your attorney to associate who we call local counsel in that county. So maybe you hire an attorney in the Atlanta area because you trust them, but you encourage them to associate a local attorney in Thomasville because that attorney may know more ins and outs about the judge's preferences and how he or she runs her courtroom if you ever got there.
Right,
so
exactly.
Another thing to think about are the juries. So when you file a lawsuit and go all the way through the litigation process and end up going to trial, then there's going to be a pool of people from that community that are called in by the court, and the lawyers for both sides are going to ask questions to this jury pool to narrow the number of jurors down to either 12 or 6, depending on the type of case and the size of the case, to the people that are actually going to sit and decide it, right?
Right.
And so, as we all know from just watching, presidential elections or any kind of election, you've got red counties, you've got purple counties, you've got blue counties, and whether most of the people that are called in are going to be conservative or progressive or somewhere in the middle matters when you're talking about a personal injury case.
Right, and I would say in talking about venue, probably the single most important aspect of the venue is going to be the jury pool, right? Because at the end of the day, the juries are the ones that decide the issue that you're trying. Mm-hmm. And so anytime we're talking about a case, talking about where we're going to file suit, the venue is almost always going to be important for the number one reason being what's the jury pool look like, right? Adjusters, defense attorneys, they all know that county Y might be more conservative than county X, so if you file a lawsuit in county Y, you might get lower offers, because they're going to say, well, the jury's going to be more conservative. They're not going to give you a lot for pain and suffering and things like that. But that's always going to be the number one, sort of factor to consider is going to be the jury pool, which also kind of, segues into another factor is you want to know what venue you're going to file into because maybe that venue gives great awards for pain and suffering, medium awards, or whatever it might be. So
or bad awards.
Or bad, exactly.
And the reason that that's important is because it's important throughout the whole case, but it's important from day one because when you enter into settlement negotiations with the at-fault insurance company, or your your own insurance company, depending on who's going to be paying the money.
Right.
They keep statistics, just like we do, of what the average jury verdict is per county. So if you've got the exact same case in a progressive county and in a very conservative county, the insurance company's offer to you is most likely going to be more in the county that's progressive than in the county that's conservative, because the insurance company looks at it like, well, our exposure is more in the progressive county and it's less in the conservative county.
Right, that's exactly right. And I think too, it's just kind of for the purpose of this video, it's important to understand that most of the time you don't have a choice with venue, right? Most of the time the venue is what it is. It's only when you have a choice between, say, different counties, or whether or not you want to file in federal court or keep it in state court, then you really have to kind of do a deep dive into, okay, which venue is best or most advantageous for our client. So keeping that in mind, another sort of thing to consider is that, sort of along the same lines with jury pools, some courts just, from a general standpoint, are just more adept at handling whether it's higher value, more sophisticated type cases with simple things like technology, resources, ease to bring in resources. And so that's one thing to consider. Georgia, like I said earlier, we have a ton of counties, and a lot of them are rural counties, right? And so you'll have judges that sit on circuits that sit over multiple counties, and you might go to one courthouse and it literally looks like a courthouse out of,
1850.
Exactly. And the technology, there might be some technology, but it might not be the best. So that's something to consider if you have an option, say, to file in what's the word I'm looking for?
A county with better resources.
Correct, exactly.
Yeah, and speaking about resources, it can also, the county that you're in can also affect how long it takes you to get to trial. Because if you're in a county that's got 12 judges, yes, they have more cases and they have that many judges because the population is higher in that county. But if it's a situation where Chase is talking about, and you're in a circuit where there's 6 counties and only 2 judges, and those 2 judges have to hear every divorce case, every felony case, every personal injury case that comes through the door, it's going to take a long time to get a trial date. So some people believe, well, if I'm in a smaller county, I should get a quicker trial date because there's less cases. Well, that's true, but the number of judges and court staff that they have is also fewer. So they are, in almost every county, the number of criminal cases that's on the docket is going to be higher than the number of civil cases that's on the docket. And in those smaller counties, sometimes those judges are very, very good at handling criminal cases because they do it all the time, but they just don't see so many civil cases. So depending on where you're at, maybe that civil case gets kicked down the road or punted. The proverbial can gets kicked down the road.
That's right.
And you have to wait and wait and wait. Whereas if you're in a bigger county with more judges, more staff, then you might get a trial date quicker.
Right. I mean, as an example, I remember you and I had a case a couple of years ago where if we didn't make it to that 1-week civil trial calendar call, it would have been literally another year until we would have been placed on the next calendar.
Yeah.
And that was for no other reason other than the fact that this particular judge traveled the circuit around to multiple counties, and the criminal caseload was twice what the civil caseload was.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something else to consider.
Yeah.
I would say another thing to consider is, ease for witnesses, ease for lawyers traveling. If you have, the option between different venues, say one's going to be in Chatham County over by Savannah, but we're, local to the Atlanta area. Well, do we want to file in Chatham if we know that most of our witnesses are, in the metro Atlanta area, or do you want to find, the venue option in Atlanta to keep it, easier for everyone to travel?
Yeah, and assuming you have the option.
Exactly.
Right? Sometimes
of course, this is assuming we have the option.
Yeah, sometimes you have to file it in a place far away. But to go along with that, when you have to travel a lot, there's expense involved with traveling, right? So, like we were talking about earlier, if you got a case in Thomasville or Savannah or whatever, if your attorney lives in North Georgia, they got to travel down there. So they're either going to drive and have to get a hotel room and all that kind of stuff. Some attorneys feel like they have to fly private airplanes.
Right.
So just know that. A little insider tip, ask that question. Are you driving or are you paying $5,000 to take a private jet? But anyway, the point is that there are additional expenses that come along with traveling. So if you have the option to choose between, say, a Savannah and Atlanta, but you know most of your witnesses are in Atlanta, then you probably want to file in Fulton County, which would be Atlanta, to save time and expense and convenience for you if you happen to live in that area.
Right.
Yep. What else?
I mean, there's a ton of other factors you can consider. I think the main takeaway is that if you have the option to choose between good venues, then you're in a good spot, right? So all these sort of factors to consider are great to have. If you have the option to choose between, multiple bad venues, not so good, but that's why it's important to have a lawyer, a trial lawyer who's experienced in knowing sort of, the best of the bad to file the suit in, and be able to consider all these factors when deciding where to actually file suit.
Yeah. So if you hear the word venue, it's really just talking about where you're going to file the case at, or what your options are to file the case. But we just wanted to do this video to stress the importance of location of where the case is going to be filed, because it really does affect settlement value, convenience, to you and to the parties of where, travel and all that. It affects the likelihood that you're going to get a full and fair recovery, and almost anything and everything in between. So just keep that in mind. And if you ever have a case and your lawyer says, well, we're going to need to file this in, Lumpkin, Georgia. And you're like, why are we filing it in Lumpkin, Georgia? I live in Kennesaw, Georgia. Well, there's reasons for that, and there may be good or bad consequences for it. But just ask those questions to your lawyer, just so you have a full picture of what you're walking into. But we appreciate, you got anything else?
Yeah, I think we covered it.
Okay, cool. Well, we appreciate you listening to this video. We hope that it's been helpful to you. If it has been, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, or otherwise we'll catch you next week for a deeper dive into some other personal injury topic.
Stay tuned, to be determined.
Super surprise.